A mandatory check for jewelry and underwear under new rule enforcement? Formula One is considered the royal class of motor racing, and it shows its royalty just not by the technology, but by the economical background of the personnel involved in the sport. We know that Formula One drivers are among the highest paid athletes, but when considering the economical background of drivers who take part in Formula One racing in recent history, they are from wealthier families with a solid economical background. It is a very difficult thing for a middle-class child to start his career as a go-kart driver and to end up in Formula One, as we know that all the current drivers in the Formula One are not due to their talent. Some are actually paid drivers who are labeled as Billionaires Kids Club. Recent drivers like Lance Stroll, Nicholas Latifi, Nikita Mazepin are some famous paid drivers who are financially backed by their parents. Outside the drivers, team principals and team managers are also very rich persons who serve as CEOs and shareholders of the companies. Formula One has turned into some kind of place to show the power of money beyond its identity as motorsport with the time. They use different methods to show the power of their money, and some are really expensive, meaningless things. As a part of this, they wear expensive clothes, jewelry, and ornaments on a race day. But the interesting thing is that they are not permitted to use them during the race since 2004, even though they wear them in the race paddock. If someone wears them during a race and becomes guilty, they are subjected to heavy fines from FIA, as according to law books. What is the actual reason behind the banning of jewelry and the mandatory use of standards during a racing event? As per Appendix L of the FIA's International Sporting Code, drivers are unable to wear any material underneath their suit and must wear fireproof underwear that adheres to the strict standard. The full statement relevant to this rule is as follows. The wearing of jewelry in the form of body piercing or metal neck chains is prohibited during the competition and may therefore be checked before the start. It is a very usual thing to see Lewis Hamilton with a tattooed body with some pierced jewelry on a race day. If this rule is imposed in 2004, how does Hamilton wear such a large number of jewelry on a race day? Is it some kind of exception for a 7-time world champion? There is no such thing for Hamilton. He was free to wear anything until this year's Australian Grand Prix. This was just a rule in the FIA book since 2004 which was never enforced. None of the race directors want to ban the Formula One drivers from wearing jewelry. But with the arrival of Niels Wittich as the race director of Formula One, he took a radical decision of enforcing the law. That's where all those controversies began. As a fan, you may feel that it is unnecessary to interfere with the private life of drivers, like jewelry and clothing, as the governing body of F1. But it has a more technical reason behind this. Following statements from an FIA document will explain the real reasons behind the jewelry ban and underwear check with a much clearer picture. This regulation is written in consideration that the wearing of jewelry underneath the required flame-proof clothing can reduce the protection afforded by this equipment. Metallic objects, such as jewelry, in contact with the skin can reduce heat transmission protection and thus may increase the risk of burn injuries in the event of a fire. The wearing of jewelry during the competition can hinder both medical interventions as well as subsequent diagnosis and treatment should it be required following an accident. The presence of jewelry can slow, due to the risk of snagging, the emergency removal of driver safety equipment, such as helmet, balaclava, and overalls. In the case that medical imaging is required to inform diagnosis following an accident, the presence of jewelry on the body can cause significant complication and delay. In the worst case, the presence of jewelry during imaging may cause further injury. Jewelry in and/or around the airway can pose specific additional risks should it become dislodged during an accident and either ingested or inhaled. One of the closest reasons behind the enforcement of this law is Romain Grosjean crash during the 2020 Bahrain Grand Prix, which is a near-death crash. Commenting about this rule enforcement, Wittich said, "In the case that medical imaging is required to inform diagnosis following an accident, the presence of jewelry on the body can cause significant complication and delay. In the worst case, the presence of jewelry during imaging may cause further injury. Jewelry in and/or around the airway can pose specific additional risks should it become dislodged during an accident and either ingested or inhaled." He further said, "The above-noted regulation is written to ensure that the FIA-approved flame-resistant clothing, including both the outer layer overalls and inner layer in contact with the skin, can operate effectively and provide the designed level of protection if exposed to flames. The use of non-flameproof materials in contact with the driver's skin, and in particular synthetic materials, can reduce heat transmission protection and thus increase the risk of burn injuries in the event of a fire. In the worst case, such materials may melt, which can hinder treatment in the event of a burn injury. Who is much affected by the jewellery ban? In the current Formula 1 grid, only a few are wearing jewelleries. Seven-time world champion Lewis Hamilton loves to wear more jewelry than other drivers, and he is the most affected person by this sudden enforcement of the law. Expressing about his view regarding jewellery ban, Hamilton said, "I don't have any plans on removing. I feel there are personal things. You should be able to be who you are. There's stuff that I can't move, so I can't even take these out. These ones in my right ear, they're literally welded in. I'll have to get them chopped off or something like that, so they will be staying." He has no intention of removing those, as some of them are attached to body as permanent jewelries, and if he removes them, it will totally affect his appearance. Even if he doesn't want to remove them, he will have to remove them sooner or later. What will happen at the Miami Grand Prix? Even a reminder was sent to the drivers during the Australian Grand Prix. This rule will come into enforcement during Miami Grand Prix. Checking of jewelry and underwear will now be part of each team's scrutineering submission ahead of a race weekend. This rule enforcement is not related only to the F1, but for the other racing categories governed under FIA as well. The most recent incident related is that two Formula E drivers break the rule, and they were given a suspended €1,000 fine. A similar thing may happen in F1 during Miami Grand Prix as well, due to the continuous fight of Hamilton against the jewellery ban. Expressing his view on the jewellery ban, Toto Wolff told media, "I think it's important to remember why wearing any kind of jewellery is not permitted in the regulations, and that is to avoid injury. Where do you draw the line? It can cause an injury, and I think all of us don't want to see an accident, freak accident, where suddenly there is a follow-on injury from jewellery. That's why the FIA, at the moment, is trying to draw a line in the sand. I understand where they're coming from." We can see this issue from different angles, but if it has true intentions of protecting the drivers' lives during an accident beyond its necessity as a fashion, then it is better to enforce this law. But the governing body should be sensitive and more flexible to problems like permanent piercings, as this law directly deals with the personal life of drivers.